Rist þú, rist þú, ristu í líkama.
According to the internet, character development is the process of building three-dimensional characters with personality, backstory, goals, strengths, and weaknesses, and if done correctly, it will create a clear character arc for the protagonist. I figured defining character development would be a good intro. A character's journey through a story often leads to them going through a series of observable changes. These changes can be very small and insignificant, or very large and meaningful. The character can become more mature, they could grow to understand themselves better, or to understand the world around them better. This is all part of their development and their growth. Typically, these changes are internal, focused only on the character's personality, their maturity, or even their ideology. In some cases, however, the internal development of a character is reflected with external changes. This serves as a visual cue to the audience, and it lets them know that there may be something happening beneath the surface, or just as a reminder of how far the character has come. The accumulation of scars on a character is a good example of this visual cue. Another good example would be the character's hair, and in the first 2 seasons of Vinland Saga, Thorfinn's internal growth and development throughout the story is mirrored perfectly by his hair. Thorfinn's story begins with him living in Iceland with his parents and his older sister. Iceland was no paradise, but they lived a relatively peaceful and calm life. Like a lot of boys his age, Thorfinn was very interested in violence and war. He was young, naive, and also a Viking. His father, Thors, was a former warrior who had seen war firsthand and knew the darkness that existed in that world, and he did not want that for his son. But Thorfinn looked up to his father, and he wanted to be a warrior just like him. Thors would try to help his son to see the dark nature of war and violence, but his words did not reach young Thorfinn. Too young, too naive, and too much of a Viking. Thors had turned his back on that life by escaping to Iceland with his family, a place where he hoped he could find peace and maybe even redemption. But he was never really able to shed the weight of his past, and eventually he was forced to go back into that darkness in order to protect the people that he cared for. And wanting to be a great warrior as well, Thorfinn snuck aboard his father's ship, the ship that was heading for war. This would ultimately lead to young Thorfinn watching his father die, a moment that would change his life forever. Seeing his father die in front of him broke young Thorfinn. He was filled with a lot of sadness and anger, more than he was able to handle, more than any kid his age would be able to handle. That sadness and anger turned into hatred and rage for the one responsible for killing his father, and he became an all-consuming fire that burned within him. Thorfinn then made it his mission to avenge his father, using that fire to guide himself towards his goal. He wanted to be a warrior, just like his father. Thorfinn became myopic in his quest for vengeance. Like a horse with blinders on, he charged toward his goal without any regard for the consequences. He had no space in his heart or mind for anything else, no space for sadness or fear, or the idea that his father would have been disappointed with the path that he had chosen. He felt no guilt for the life that he took. Every action was justified if it moved him closer to his goal. His life was war and violence, the very darkness that his father wanted him to avoid. Suffice it to say, Thorfinn was a mess, and all of that was reflected through his hair, disheveled, unkempt, dirty, and suffocating. Along the way, he would meet kind strangers who tried to remind him of the peace and the calm that he once knew. But he was not ready to let go of the rage that was in his heart. He was a warrior on a mission to avenge his father, and nothing would get in the way of that mission. Thorfinn would eventually fail in his quest for revenge. The warrior failed to complete his mission of vengeance, and all the terrible things he had done in service of that mission turned out to be pointless. The goal that he used to define himself was no longer attainable, and he now had no place to focus all of his rage. The all-consuming fire that burned inside him began to subside, and without it, he became an empty man. An empty man who now had to deal with the weight of his choices. He now had to deal with the guilt for all the lives he had taken. All of this weighed heavily on Thorfinn's shoulders. That weight would only grow heavier with time. He found himself unable to truly move forward, and he sunk into a deep depression. He saw no value in his own life. Thorfinn was haunted by the life that he had taken and overwhelmed by the darkness of his choices. All of that was reflected through his hair. He would once again meet kind strangers who reminded him of the peace and the calm that he once knew, and this time he was ready to accept it. There was no more rage left in his heart. There was space within him for something else. He found a way to carry the weight of his past, a way to live with it, but not yet a way to be rid of it. Thorfinn was confronted with the darkness of violence once again, and he realized he needed to find a way to truly move forward. It had taken Thorfinn a long time to get to this point. After having traveled a similar path, his father's words would finally reach him. He now understood what his father was trying to teach him, and the words that Thor's left him with became the light that Thorfinn needed to guide himself out of the darkness, and he could begin to truly move forward. From that point on, whenever Thorfinn was confronted with that darkness, he was able to see clearly, and he would always find a way out. He was becoming a true warrior, just like his father. Thorfinn returned to his home, to his mother and to his sister. He told them about the long journey that he had been on, and all that he experienced along the way. He was finally able to shed the weight of his past, something his father struggled with. He was now able to begin again. He had a clear vision for the future that he wanted to create. The true warrior had a new mission that he needed to accomplish, a mission to create a better world. Thorfinn was on his way to create the world that his father dreamed of, and he was now free from the weight of his past. And of course, that too was reflected through his hair. I'm Jonny, and I'll see you in the next one. Now subscribe to the channel so I know you're not my enemy.